Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to Stately Von Manor, where Roger and I have returned for another thrilling BookTube event announcement. Yes, it's another announcement for another thrilling event. You just can't get enough of those. So here we are, talking about BookTrek 2024. That's right, BookTrek is returning. So BookTrek 2021 was actually the very first BookTube event that I ever took part in. You don't remember BookTrek 2021, Roger. He wasn't in season 1 of my fantastic program. But BookTrek 2021, yeah, it was my first BookTube event. And it's all about reading Star Trek fiction. It is the nerdiest BookTube event of all, created by the great Vin over at Revenant Reads. Revenant Reads is a great channel, and if you have not watched that channel, you should watch it. Vin and I, we started at about the same time, I think. And we've been BookTube friends for years now, a few years now. And every year, BookTrek rolls around, a celebration of Star Trek and Star Trek fiction. And it's always fun. It's always a lot of fun because I love Star Trek. I've been watching Star Trek since before I could talk. My mother was a big Star Trek fan, so when the Star Trek reruns, whenever a rerun of Star Trek would come on television, I would watch it, So since I was a toddler, I've been watching Star Trek. So Star Trek has always existed for me. I can't remember the first episode I watched because who knows what it was. But Kirk, Spock, McCoy, the crew of the Starship Enterprise, they've always existed for me. And I was a huge fan of Star Trek when I was a little kid. And then in the 1980s, Star Trek The Next Generation showed up, and I strongly disliked it. I kind of despised it, actually, when it first showed up. I remember watching the pilot episode thinking, this is crap. This isn't the real Star Trek, I said to myself, and I said that frequently during the first season of Star Trek The Next Generation. There were some stinkers in that first year. And I really didn't like Star Trek The Next Generation when it first showed up. But I kept watching it, of course. By the end of the second season, I think it was my favorite show ever. Definitely by the third season, I was, it was my favorite show. I loved it. Just loved it. But I haven't actually watched Star Trek The Next Generation for years until recently. I watched Star Trek The Next Generation as it was aired in the 80s and the 90s. And I watched every episode every week pretty much, if I could. Yeah, I think I did. I think I watched every single one. And then, aside from a few episodes here and there, I haven't really watched it since that time. And so recently I started rewatching Star Trek The Next Generation. I watched the first 2 seasons. I'm into the 3rd season now. And I'm kind of surprised because the first couple seasons were not as bad as I remember them being. Even the first season wasn't as bad as I remember it being, despite having some terrible episodes. First couple seasons had some rough episodes, but they also had great episodes, particularly the second season. That season was really up and down as far as quality was concerned. But it's been interesting. And so for this year, for Star Trek BookTrek 2024, the Summer of Trek has rolled around again. Last year we did the Summer of Trek where we just read Star Trek books all summer long. And it's going to be the same this year. I think it is called The Wrath of the Summer of Trek this year is our official title. And all you have to do is during the summer, read some Star Trek books, or read a Star Trek book, or a couple of Star Trek books, that's all. You could read Star Trek nonfiction, that's the thing you can do, and you can even, to take part in the spirit of BookTrek, read a science book. Because Star Trek is very much about science. You could do all of those things, but it's primarily about Star Trek fiction. And so for this year, since I've been rewatching Star Trek The Next Generation, I'm going to be reading Next Generation books and some original series books because the original series is still the best, always will be. And I figure next year after I've rewatched uh, Deep Space Nine, then I'll read some Deep Space Nine books next year. See, I'm thinking ahead for BookTrek. Got to think ahead for these important events. So I have a lot of Star Trek books. I know. I have a lot. And so I grabbed some from my piles of Star Trek books. I've been picking them up, or had been picking them up, ever since BookTrek started. And so I've got a few. And so I grabbed some from the first season, or from the first show, the original series, and from Next Generation. And so for the ones I picked for Star Trek the original series, now I'm not going to read all of these. I just grabbed these so I have a couple piles to work on. But I think the first one I'm going to read is this one. This is Star Trek: The Price of the Phoenix, which is a book I've been wanting to read anyway. I know that this is Steve Donohue's favorite Star Trek book. He is taking part this year. And so The Price of the Phoenix, this is one I'm going to read, definitely, for Star Trek, BookTrek 2024. So I'm not sure really what this is about, but I hear it's cheesy fun. So The Price of the Phoenix, this is one of the older Star Trek original series books. Now this one I'm interested in because Joe Haldeman wrote it. You would never be able to tell just from the cover that it's a Star Trek book. I don't see the Enterprise on here anywhere. But it is. It's a Star Trek book. World Without End. Joe Haldeman wrote this book. I hear this book is not particularly good, but I'm going to read it anyway. World Without End. There you go. And then I've just got some random original series books. This is The Starless World. This is the OG Captain Kirk with the old style Klingons from the original series. The old Klingons. So The Starless World. This is by Gordon Eklund. Gordon Eklund wrote this book. I have no idea if it's any good. It probably sucks, but I'll read it anyway. Then we've got Mutiny on the Enterprise. It's Mutiny on the Enterprise. This is from the motion picture era, the era of the motion picture. This is by Robert E. Vardaman. Robert E. Vardaman. I'm like, what am I looking? I don't have my glasses on. Why do I even do these episodes without glasses on? It's ridiculous. So Robert E. Vardaman wrote this book. Not a name I'm familiar with. So that's The Mutiny. And this is The Wounded Sky by Diane Duane. So I've got a stack here of original series adventures. The Wounded Sky. And I've never read any of these, of course. And then I've got some Next Generation books. So let's pull those out. Okay, this one is The Eyes of the Beholders by A.C. Crispin. And there's like this weird crystal thing floating above Picard and Geordi's head, and there's an Andorian in the back. So I don't know. The Eyes of the Beholders. Haven't read this. I've actually only read a couple Next Generation books in my life. For BookTrek, I read the very first Star Trek, the Next Generation book that came out, and it was terrible. Hopefully this won't be terrible, but it might be terrible. We'll see. It's The Eyes of the Beholders. I grabbed that. And then this one I grabbed because Worf is on it. It's War Drums. War Drums with Worf and that evil captain from Battlestar Galactica. It's the evil captain from Battlestar Galactica. And Worf. And some weird Klingon person in the back. Who knows who that is. But this is War Drums. So got to read some Star Trek with Worf in it. What do we have here? This is Grounded. Grounded by David Bischoff. Grounded, no idea what that is, but there's Data and Captain Picard and a little Starship Enterprise floating over their shoulders. So you have that. Here's another Worf cover that I grabbed. It's A Call to Darkness. So this is an early one. This has the unpopular Dr. Pulaski on the cover. Dr. Pulaski wasn't very popular because, she took over for Dr. Crusher that one year when Dr. Crusher was temporarily fired before she came back for the third season. Nobody really likes Pulaski, although she kind of grew on me this last time I watched Star Trek The Next Generation Season 2. But, you know, I was happy to see her go for Dr. Pulaski returning, or for Dr. Crusher returning. So there's Worf and Geordi in this old novel, A Call to Darkness. So this is an early Star Trek The Next Generation book. Who knows? Who knows if I'll even get to it this year, but maybe I will. And then we've got the Romulan Prize with this moody looking Romulan dude in the back. Romulans, man. They always are causing trouble. So there we go. I've got my piles. I'm all ready to go. I'll just stack these over there along with all the other stacks of books I'm reading for various projects and events. So BookTrek 2024. It should be exciting. We've got a bunch of great co-hosts that I'll link down below. And that's all I have to say about it. And I will catch you next time.